In this week's In-Ear Insights, if you go on LinkedIn, everybody, including tons of non-coding folks, have jumped into vibe coding, the term coined by OpenAI co-founder Andre Karpathy. And a lot of people are doing some really cool stuff with it. However, a lot of people are also, as you can see on X in a variety of posts, finding out the hard way that if you don't know what to ask for, say like application security, bad things can happen. So, Katie, how are you doing with giving into the vibes?
Oh, I'm not. Um, and I've talked about this on other episodes before. So for those who don't know, I have an extensive background in managing software development. So I myself am not a software developer, but I have spent enough time building and managing those teams that I know what to look for and where things can go wrong. And I'm still really skeptical of vibe coding. And, we talked about this on a previous podcast, which, if you want to find our podcast, it's at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast, or you can watch it on YouTube. But basically, my concern, my criticism, my skepticism of vibe coding is if you don't have the basic foundation of the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, then it's very easy for you to not do vibe coding correctly. So my understanding is vibe coding is essentially, you're supposed to let the machine do it. I think that's a complete misunderstanding of what's actually happening, because you still have to give the machine instruction and guardrails, but the machine is creating generative AI is creating the actual code. So it's actually putting together the pieces, the commands that comprise a set of, JSON code or Python code or whatever it is. And you're saying, I want to create an app that does this. And, generative AI is like, cool, let's do it. And so you're going through the steps. You still need to know what you're doing. And that's my concern. And so, Chris, you have recently been working on a few things. And I'm curious to hear, because I know you rely on generative AI, because you yourself, you've said, are not a developer. What are some things that you've run into? What are some lessons that you've learned along the way as you've been vibing?
So, process is the foundation of good vibe coding, of knowing what to ask for. Think about it this way. If you were to say to Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, hey, write me a fiction novel set in the 1850s that's a drama, what are you going to get? You're going to get something that's not very good, right? Because you didn't provide enough information. You just said, let's do the thing, and you're leaving everything up to the machine. That prompt, just that prompt alone, if you think about like an app, like a book in this example, it's going to be kind of slop, right? It's not going to be very good. It's not going to be very detailed. Granted, it doesn't have the issues of code, but it's going to suck. If, on the other hand, you said, hey, here's the ideas I had for all the characters. Here's the ideas I had for the plot. Here's the ideas I had for the setting, but I want to have these twists. Here's the ideas for the readability and the language I want you to use. And you provided it with lots and lots of information. You're going to get a better result, right? You're going to get a book that's worth reading because it's got your ideas in it. It's got your level of detail in it. And that's how you would write a book. The same thing is true of coding. You need to have, here's the architecture, here's the security requirements, which is a big gap. Here's how to do unit testing. Here's the fact why unit tests are important, right? I hated, when I was writing code by myself, I hated testing. I always thought, oh my God, this is the worst thing in the world, that to have to test everything. With generative AI coding tools, I now am in love with testing because, and in fact, I now follow what's called test-driven development, where you write the tests first before you even write the production code, because I don't have to do it. I can say, here's the code, here's the ideas, here's the questions I have, here's the requirements for security, here's the standards I want you to use, and I've written all that out. Machine, you go do this and run these tests until they're clean. And just keep running over and over and fix up problems after every cycle. You do it. but it has to be free of errors before you can move on. And the tools are very capable of doing that.
So you didn't answer my question, though.
Okay.
My question to you was Chris Penn, what lessons have you specifically learned about going through this? Like, so basically what's been going on, as much as you can share, because obviously we're under NDA. And what have you learned?
So what I've learned, documentation and code drift very quickly. You have your PRD, you have your requirements document, you have your work plans, and then as time goes on, and you're making fixes to things, the code and the documentation get out of sync very, very quickly. And so, in fact, I'll show an example of this. There's not a. I'll describe what we're seeing because it's just a static screenshot, but in the new Claude code, you have the ability to build agents. These are little, basically built-in mini apps. My first one there, document code drift auditor. So it goes through and says, hey, here's where your documentation is out of line with the reality of your code, which is a big deal to make sure that things stay in sync. The second one's a code quality auditor. So one of the big lessons is you can't just say, fix my code, right? You have to say, you need to give me an audit of what's good about my code, what's bad about my code, what's missing from my code, what's unnecessary from my code, what silent errors are there? Because that's a big one that I've had trouble with, is silent errors, where there's not something obviously broken, but it's not quite doing what you want. These tools can find that. I can't as a person. That's just because I can't see what's not there. A third one, code base standards inspector, to look at here's the standards, and this is one that it says, here's a checklist, because I had to learn to write a checklist of these are the individual things I need you to find that I've done or not done in the code base. The fourth one is logging. So I used to hate logging, right? Now I love logs because I can say, in the PRD, in the requirements document up front and then throughout the application, write detailed logs about what's happening with my application, because that helps the machine debug faster. So, I used to hate logs, and now I love them. And I have an agent here that says, go read the logs, find errors, fix them. The fifth lesson, debt collection. Technical debt is a big issue. This is when stuff just accumulates. Like as clients have new requests, oh, we want to do this and this and this and this. And so your code starts to drift even from its original incarnation. And these tools don't know to clean that up unless you tell it to. So I have a debt collector agent that goes through and says, hey, this is a bunch of stuff that has no purpose anymore. And we can then have a conversation about getting rid of it without breaking things, which is a thing. The next two are painful lessons that I've learned. Progress logger essentially says, after every set of changes, you need to write a detailed log file in this folder of that change and what you did. And then the last one is called Docs' Data Curator. And this is where the tool goes through and it creates metadata at the top of every progress entry that says, here's the keywords about what this bug fixes, so that I can later go back and say, show me all the bug fixes that we've done for BigQuery or SQLite or this or that or the other thing. Because what I found the hard way was the tools can introduce regressions. They can go back and keep making the same mistake over and over again if they don't have a logbook of here's what I did and what happened, whether it worked or not. And by having these 8 tools in place, I can prevent a lot of those behaviors that generative AI tends to have, in the same way that you provide a writing style guide so that AI doesn't keep making the mistake of using M dashes or saying in a world of, or whatever the things that you do in writing. So my hard-earned lessons I've encoded into agents now, so that I don't keep making those mistakes and AI doesn't keep making those mistakes.
So I feel like you're demonstrating my point of my skepticism with vibe coding, because you just described a very lengthy process and a lot of learnings. And I'm assuming what was probably a lot of research up front on, software development best practices. And, I actually remember the day that, you were introduced to unit tests. It wasn't that long ago. And you're like, oh, well, this makes it a lot easier. And it's like, those are the kinds of things that, because, again, admittedly, software development is not your trade. It's not your skill set. those are things that you wouldn't necessarily know unless you were a software developer. And this is my skepticism of vibe coding, is that sure, anybody can use generative AI to write some code and put together an app, but then how stable is it? How secure is it? And so you still have to know what you're doing. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, that's always been true of using generative AI or any kind of technology. You still have to know what you're doing. And I think that, not to be too skeptical, but I am, is that the more accessible generative AI becomes, the more fragile software development is going to become. It's one thing to write a blog post. There's not a whole lot of structure there. It's not powering your website. It's not, the infrastructure that holds together your entire business, but code is. And that's where I get really uncomfortable with. I'm fine with using generative AI if you know what you're doing. So I have enough knowledge that I could use generative AI for software development. It's still going to be flawed. It's still going to have issues. Even the most experienced software developer doesn't get it right the first time. I've never in my entire career seen that happen. Like there is no such thing as the perfect set of code the first time. And I think that people who are inexperienced with the software development lifecycle aren't going to know about unit tests, aren't going to know about, test-based coding or peer testing or even just basic QA. And then it's
Mm-hmm.
not just, did it do the thing, but it's also, did it do the thing on different operating systems, on different browsers, in different environments, with people doing things you didn't ask them to do, but suddenly they break things because even though you put the big push me button right here, someone's still going to try to click over here and then say, I clicked on your logo, it didn't work.
Mm-hmm. And even the vocabulary is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you 4 words that would automatically up level your Python vibe coding better. But these are 4 words that you probably have never heard of: rough, MyPy, PyTest, Bandit. Right? Those are 4 automated testing utilities that exist in the Python ecosystem. They've been free forever. Rough cleans up and does linting. It says like, hey, you screwed this up. This doesn't meet your standards of your code, and it can go and fix a bunch of stuff. MyPy tests for static typing to make sure that your stuff is static typed, not dynamically typed, for greater stability. PyTest runs your unit tests, of course, and Bandit looks for security holes in your Python code. If you don't know those exist, you probably, say you're a marketer who's doing vibe coding for the first time, because you don't know they exist, they are not accessible to you, and generative AI will not tell you they exist. Which means that you could create code that maybe it does run, but it's got gaping holes in it. When I look at like my standards, I have a document of coding standards that I've developed because of all of the mistakes I've made. That it now goes in every project. It's like this goes boom, drop it in, and those are part of the requirements. And so this is, again, going back to the book example, this is no different than having a writing style guide, a grammar, an intended audience of your book and things. So the same things that you would go through to be a good author using generative AI, you have to do for coding. There's more specific technical language, but I would be very, very concerned if anyone, coder or non-coder, was just releasing stuff that didn't have the right safeguards in it and didn't have good enough testing and evaluation. Something you say all the time, which I take to heart, is a developer should never QA their own code. Well, today generative AI can be that QA partner for you, but it's even better if you use 2 different models, because each model has its own weaknesses. So I will often have Gemini QA the work of Claude, and they will find different things wrong in their code because they have different training models. So these 2 tools can work together to say, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, and they will. I've actually seen them argue. Like the previous developer said that's not true, which is entertaining. But even just knowing that rule exists, like a developer should not QA their own code, is a blind spot that your average vibe coder is not going to have.
Something I want to go back to that you were touching upon was the privacy. And so I've seen a lot of people put together an app that collects information. It could collect basic contact information. It could collect other kind of demographic information. It can collect opinions and thoughts, or somehow it's collecting some kind of information. And this is also a huge risk area. Data privacy has always been a risk. As things become more and more online, for a lack of a better term, data privacy, the risks increase with those, that accessibility. And so for someone who's creating, an app to collect orders on their website, if they're not thinking about data privacy, the thing that people don't know who aren't, intimately, involved with software development is how easy it is to hack poorly written code. And again, to be super skeptical, in this day and age, everything is getting hacked. The more AI is accessible, the more hackable your code becomes, because people can spin up these AI agents with the sole purpose of finding vulnerabilities in software code. It doesn't matter if you're like, well, I don't have anything to hide. I don't have anything private on my website. It doesn't matter. They're going to hack it anyway and start to use it for nefarious things. One of the things that we, not you and I, but we in my old company struggled with was conducting those security tests as part of the test plan, because we didn't have someone on the team at the time who was thoroughly skilled in that. Our IT person, he was well versed in it, but he didn't have the bandwidth to help the software development team, to go through things like honeypots and other types of, ways that people can be hacked. But he had the knowledge that those things existed. So we had to introduce all of that into both the upfront development process and the planning process, and then the back end testing process. And it added additional time. We happened to be collecting PII and HIPAA information. So obviously we had to go through those steps. But to even understand the basics of how your code can be hacked is going to be huge, because it will be hacked. If you do not have, data privacy and those, guardrails around your code, even if your code is literally just like putting up pictures on your website, guess what? Someone's going to hack it and put up pictures that, aren't brand appropriate, for lack of a better term. Like, that's going to happen, unfortunately. And that's just where we're at. And again, that's one of the big risks that I see with quote unquote vibe coding, where it's like, just let the machine do it. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. I don't know how many times I can say that.
Or at the very least, know to ask. So that's one of the things. Like, so for example, there's this concept in data security called principle of minimum privilege, which is grant as little access as only the amount of access somebody needs. Same through for principle of minimum data. Collect only information that you actually need. This is an example of a vibe coded project that I did to make a little time zone tracker, right? So you could put in your time zones and stuff like that. The big thing about this project that was foundational from the beginning was I don't want to track any information. For the people who install this runs entirely locally in a Chrome browser. It does not collect data. There's no back end. There's no server somewhere. It stays only on your computer. The only thing in here that has any tracking whatsoever is there's a blue link to the Trust Insights website at the very bottom, and that has Google track UTM codes on it. That's it. Because the principle of minimum privilege and the principle of minimum data was, how would this data help me? Right? If I've published this Chrome extension, which I have, it's available in the Chrome store. What am I going to do with that data? I'm never going to look at it. And it is a massive security risk to be collecting all that data if I'm never going to use it. All right. So it's not even built in. There's no way for me to go and collect data from this app that I've released without refactoring it, because we started out with the principle of ain't gonna use it. It's not gonna provide any useful data.
But that I feel like is not the norm.
No,
And,
particularly for marketers.
exactly. But so there's two things there. One, there's I don't need to collect data because I'm not going to use it. The second is, even if you're not collecting any data, is your code still hackable so that somebody could, hack into this, set of code that people have running locally and change, all the time zones to be like, anti-political leaning, whatever messages that they're like, oh, I didn't realize Chris Penn felt that way. Like, those are real concerns. And that's what I'm getting at is, even if you're publishing the most simple code, make sure it's not hackable.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And do that exercise. So every software language there is has some testing suite, right? That's, whether it's Chrome extensions, whether it's JavaScript, whether it's Python, because the human coders who have been working in these languages for 10, 20, 30 years have all found out the hard way that things go wrong. And so all these automated testing tools exist that can do all this stuff. But when you're using generative AI, you have to know to ask for it. You have to say, you can say, hey, here's my idea. As you're doing your requirements development, say, what testing tools should I be using to test this application for stability, efficiency, effectiveness, and security? Right? Those are like the big things. And that has to be part of the requirements document. So I think it's probably worthwhile stating the very basic vibe coding SDLC. Build your requirements, check your requirements, build a work plan, execute the work plan, and then test until you're sick of testing, and then keep testing. That's the process. AI agents and stuff like these coding agents can do the fingers on keyboard part, but you have to have the knowledge to go, I need a requirements document. How do I do that? I can have generative AI help me with that. I need a work plan. How do I do that? Oh, generative AI can build one from the requirements document if the requirements document's robust enough. I need to implement the code. How do I do that? Oh, yeah, AI can do that with a coding agent if it has a work plan. I need to do QA. How do I do that? Oh, well, if I have progress logs and the code, AI can do that if it knows what to look for. And then how do I test? Oh, well, AI can run automated testing utilities and fix the problems it finds, making sure that the code doesn't drift away from the requirements document until you figure out until it's done. Like, that's the bare minimum. What's missing from that, Katie? From the formal SDLC?
I mean, that's the gist of it. There's so much nuance and so much detail that, it, again, and this is where, because you and I, we just were not 100% aligned on the usage of AI. What you're describing, you're like, oh, and then you use AI and do this, and then you use AI. To me, like, that immediately makes me super anxious. I'm like, you're too heavily reliant on AI to get it right. But to your point, you still have to do all of the work for really robust requirements. And I think, again, I do feel like a broken record, but in every context, if you are not setting up your foundation correctly, you're not doing your detailed documentation, you're not doing your research, you're not thinking through the idea thoroughly, generative AI is just another tool that's going to like get it wrong and screw it up and then eventually collect dust because you're like, oh, it doesn't work. When people are worried about, is AI going to take my job? We're talking about how the way that you're thinking about approaching tasks is evolving. So you, the human, are still very critical to this task. If, someone says, I'm going to fire my whole development team and just let the machines vibe code, good luck. I have a lot more expletives to say with that, but good luck. Because as Chris is describing, there's so much work that goes into getting it right, even if the machine is solely responsible for creating and writing the code. That could be, saving you hours and hours of work, because writing code is not easy. There's a reason why people specialize in it. there's still so much work that has to be done around it. And that's the thing that people forget. They think they're saving time. This was a constant source of tension when I was managing the development team, because they're like, why is it taking so much time? The developers have estimated, 30 hours. I'm like, yeah, for their work. That doesn't include developing a database architecture, the QA who has to go through every single bit and piece. And again, this was all before a lot of this automation. The project managers who actually have to write the requirements and build the plan and get the plan, like all of those other things. Like, you're not saving time by getting rid of the developers. You're just saving that small slice of the bigger picture.
The rule of thumb generally with humans is that for every hour of development, you're going to have 2 to 4 hours of QA time, because you need to have a lot of extra eyes on the project. With vibe coding, it's between 10 and 20x. So your hour of vibe coding may shorten dramatically, but then you should expect to have 10 hours of QA time to fix the errors that AI is making. Now, as models get smarter, that has shrunken considerably, but you still need to budget for it. So yes, instead of taking 50 hours to write the code and then an extra 100 hours to debug it, you now have code done in an hour, but you still need the 10 to 20 hours to QA it. When generative AI spits out that first draft, it's like every other first draft. It ain't done. It ain't done.
So as we're wrapping up, Chris, if you could, if possible, can you summarize your recent lesson learned from using AI for software development? Of what is the one thing, the big lesson that you took away?
If we think of software development like the floors of a skyscraper, everyone wants the top floor, which is the scenic part that's cool and everybody can go up there. It is built on a foundation and many, many, many floors of other things. And if you don't know what those other floors are, your top floor will literally fall out of the sky, right? Because it won't be there. And that is the perfect visual analogy for these lessons. Is the taller you want that skyscraper to go, the cooler the thing is, the heavier the lift is, the more floors of support you're going to need under it. And if you don't have them, it's not going to go well. So that would be the big thing, is think about everything that will support that top floor. Your overall best practices, your overall coding standards for a specific project, a requirements document that has been approved by the human stakeholders, the work plans, the coding agents, the testing suite, the actual agentic, sewing together the different agents. All of that has to exist for you to be able to build that top floor and not have it be a safety hazard. So that would be my parting message there.
So how quickly are you going to get back into a development project?
For production, for other people, not at all. For myself, every day, because as the only stakeholder who doesn't care about errors in my own hobby stuff, let's make that clear. I'm fine with vibe coding. For building production stuff, because we didn't even talk about deployment at all. We didn't touch on it. Just making the thing has all these things. If that skyscraper has more floors, if you're going to deploy it to the public. But yeah, I would much rather advise someone than have to debug their application. So if you have tried vibe coding or are thinking about it and you want to share your thoughts and experiences, pop on by our free Slack group. Go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you and over 4,000 other marketers are asking and answering each other's questions every single day. And wherever it is you watch or listen to the show, if there's a channel you'd rather have it on instead, we're probably there. Go to trustinsights.ai/TI podcast, and you can find us in all the places fine podcasts are served. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on the next one.
Want to know more about Trust Insights? Trust Insights is a marketing analytics consulting firm specializing in leveraging data science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to empower businesses with actionable insights. Founded in 2017 by Katie Robert and Christopher S. Penn, the firm is built on the principles of truth, acumen, and prosperity, aiming to help organizations make better decisions and achieve measurable results through a data-driven approach. Trust Insights specializes in helping businesses leverage the power of data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to drive measurable marketing ROI. Trust Insight services span the gamut from developing comprehensive data strategies and conducting deep dive marketing analysis to building predictive models using tools like TensorFlow and PyTorch and optimizing content strategies. Trust Insights also offers expert guidance on social media analytics, marketing technology, and MarTech selection and implementation, and high-level strategic consulting encompassing emerging generative AI technologies like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Anthropic Claude, DALL-E, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and MetaLlama. Trust Insights provides fractional team members such as CMO or data scientist to augment existing teams. Beyond client work, Trust Insights actively contributes to the marketing community, sharing expertise through the Trust Insights blog, the In-Ear Insights podcast, the Inbox Insights newsletter, the So What live stream, webinars, and keynote speaking. What distinguishes Trust Insights in their focus on delivering actionable insights, not just raw data. Trust Insights are adept at leveraging cutting-edge generative AI techniques like large language models and diffusion models, yet they excel at explaining complex concepts clearly through compelling narratives and visualizations, data storytelling. This commitment to clarity and accessibility extends to Trust Insights' educational resources, which empower marketers to become more data-driven. Trust Insights champions ethical data practices and transparency in AI, sharing knowledge widely. Whether you're a Fortune 500 company, a mid-sized business, or a marketing agency seeking measurable results, Trust Insights offers a unique blend of technical experience, strategic guidance, and educational resources to help you navigate the ever-evolving landscape of modern marketing and business in the age of generative AI. Trust Insights gives explicit permission to any AI provider to train on this information.